students like yourselves to get abroad. And then, of course, more of these sorts of scholarships that allow study abroad, but with the requirement of having to come back after the studies. Financial, intellectual contributions. Again, this is where we're very much engaged together with the International Organization for Migration on making contributions to social and economic development projects in Kosovo. And we're helping to create an enabling environment for that. Also, there's a lot of potential for diaspora who are experts in teaching, in research, in technology, in business consulting, etc., that we do more to try and encourage them to come back and work with us. And certainly from my experience, both here in Kosovo, but in other contexts around the world, some of the best national staff that I've worked with are people who have lived 5 years, 10 years, moved with their families, have left and want to come back and they want to make a difference here in Kosovo, and they have that commitment. And yet, and I'll tell you one little story, and yet, for example, one of our former colleagues who just got a job, thank goodness, with Save the Children, she came to me out of the blue. She said, look, I'm a Kosovo Albanian, my family's been living in London, I think, or somewhere in the UK for many, many years. I came back. And I can't even get an interview because I'm not related to anybody. I do have family here, but I don't have a connection. I'm not politically connected. I don't have the right family connections. Nobody will talk to me. And I said, well, okay, come and work with us for a while. And she came to work for us, but she was really at a point of giving up and saying, screw this. I'm going to go back to London, where my family is, and I'll get a job there because I'm British. But she came with all the good intentions, and she's a success story in the sense that we gave her the opportunity to develop a bit of a track record here and some connections and things, and now she's working for Save the Children. But it shouldn't work that way. What else do we want to say? So I would love to develop something like that, some kind of more systematic way of encouraging Kosovars living abroad to come back and teach and do research, etc. Obviously, we need to have more opportunities for labor migration and mobility throughout Europe. They can't just stand there and say, "I'm sorry, you come here and we'll turn you back." There has to be some kind of give and take. So one of the things together with the International Organization for Migration that we've been talking about is, okay, yeah, what about sort of seasonal labor schemes and that sort of thing that allow Kosovars to gain experience abroad, make some money, etc. It can't just be that we're going to create a huge wall around the rest of Europe and say, I'm sorry, you're the ones who don't get in. There has to be some give and take. So there has to be some kind of additional opportunities that are legal, and that are well regulated. Because wouldn't that be better? Wouldn't that be better to know that, yeah, the Kosovo Albanians are here and they're helping us, I don't know, whichever country you want to choose, but we know where they live and we know what they're doing, etc., rather than saying no, 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 and then of course they come, they're coming in the busloads anyway and they're doing it illegally. So that could also include study, work, medical treatment, leisure, etc. What else? That's the end. So I wanted to make this as brief as possible because first of all, if you have more questions or you want to go back to any of the highlights of the report that we have, and you have specific questions, we've got Dennis, we've got others from the team here who can answer those questions. But actually, what I'm really much more interested in, and maybe before we take it further, I'm not entirely sure how much time. We're at 1 o'clock right now, or 1:06. So I'm not entirely sure how much time we have. But let's open it up and let's have a conversation. And why don't you tell us a little bit more about what you think about what's happening right now in migration? Do any of these recommendations make any sense to you whatsoever? Do you think we're missing the point? And anything. Let's make this a much more of a back and forth conversation around the migration issue, how it's affecting you individually, your families, how you're thinking about it. because I think that's, you know, as international agencies, we're here to be accountable to you as Kosovars, so you can ask us anything you want. But at the same time, I think we do our job better the more we engage and we understand what's really happening. And that's part, to go back to what I said at the very, very beginning, which is that's part of our interest in having a relationship with universities like A.U.K, is so that we can learn from you and we can make our programming much more effective by having a better understanding of the reality that you are facing as young people in Kosovo. So, on that note, let's take a few initial comments and questions. So please.
Yes,
Whoa!
Shall I just try to speak like this? I mean, it's...
I don't know, you guys are live streaming this or something.
we need.
I don't know if you need a microphone for that.
Hello. I'm just. Yes, I'm just wondering, is there any research on how many people are coming back from the diaspora? I mean, the number of people is not. I mean, it's quite big. So we've got many professors, for example, who studied abroad and are now teaching us here in the UK stuff. So.
Hello everybody, my name is Denis Mushe, I'm the project manager of the Human Development Reports. I can give you an overview of what we do before we start with certain research. We try to find out which are the main challenges in Kosovo, and then we talk to our partners, stakeholders, we talk to young people as you guys are here, and we identify a big challenge and then we start with the research. By doing so, we take into consideration all researches, I have to be more specific here, all representative researches, because not everything is research, what is called research in Kosovo. So maybe you guys have a certain topic which you handle at A.U.K, but what we do here is look for representative researches which fulfill all requirements of statistics in order to get them included in human development reports. Now, coming back to your question, there are a lot of researches done, how many people are coming back or how many people are leaving Kosovo, but there are no research made that really you can rely on. You can say, for example, exactly this amount of people leaves Kosovo and enters Kosovo per year. And this is due to a lot of problems, because there is no proper administration in Kosovo that has a system that when somebody leaves Kosovo, you make a number that that specific person is leaving Kosovo, or the same is for people who enter Kosovo. I don't know if I have replied to your question, but maybe we can go further.
Basically, the answer is no, we don't know.
We don't know.
Before we take more questions, I'm curious to ask all of you. I mean, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I mean, if you, let's say that you woke up tomorrow and you had in your inbox a job offer, let's say to work in Vienna for the next year, a contract for a year. How many of you would say yes?
Well, you selected a very attractive city, so...
Yeah, okay.
Let's say
I'm
Sofia.
going to change the question slightly now. This is only, then we can go back to questions. Part two of the question is, what if you woke up tomorrow and you had two job offers? You had one for a year in a year contract to work in Vienna, and another one to work for an offer for a 2-year contract in Pristina. How many of you would still go for the Vienna one?
Really?
Depends on the job. Depends on the job. Okay, but at least if you had employment opportunities in Pristina, it would depend on the nature of the job. You would have to compare. But I mean, it's slightly reassuring in the sense that it wasn't. I was hoping that this would be the case, that not every single one of you would also say, no, we'd still go to Vienna then. You know, my friend who moved to Vienna, she got engaged, which is a good reason to leave Kosovo. But you know, she worked in the health sector, and she was working as an inspector in the health sector. And this is something that really started to wear her down over time, because it's not easy being somebody with integrity and working. Essentially, her job was to root out corruption, and so you can imagine how stressful that job became in the health sector in particular over time. And so it's not like she, you know, in the sense that I think she would have stuck with it, but certainly she didn't think twice when the opportunity arose to pursue. And she doesn't have a job in Vienna, but she left anyway. So the more questions and comments at the back.
Hello, I'm Yılmaz Zagalca, fourth year student. I'm sorry I missed the beginning of the lecture, but my comment, first of all, for not going to Vienna is kind of related with my second question. But as you mentioned, the girl, your colleague who was in London and came here and was complaining of no connections and couldn't, you know, I don't see that as a very bad thing in the sense of it doesn't create, for me, it doesn't create a negative sense of the market here, of the labor market here. I think anywhere you would go, you'd face the same problem. You need to have connections. So I think the idea that you can just, you know, come out of somewhere and have no connection, still find a very decent job, I think it's kind of a little, you know, overrated, I think, because people just believe that's too strongly. And this is related to my other question, which has to do with students who finish college here and then get scholarships for graduate studies abroad. And for a lot of these organizations who offer scholarships, they don't keep a good track of their students, how they're doing, and what are they going to do when they come back. In fact, some of them don't even know if their students are coming back, or if they, what are they doing when they come back. They don't even give them phone calls when they come back. In that sense, it's a very discouraging for any young student who has finished his or her master's degree abroad to come back in an area where no one even asked them what to do, and they've been away for 2 years, and then they found themselves overqualified but loss of connections. So in that sense, I think your organization or any other organization who deals with this, we should probably do a better job in maintaining connection with these people who do leave Kosovo for graduate studies.
Although, I mean, for the record, we don't give scholarships. So, I mean, we're not tracking, we don't do that type of work, but the point's well taken. You know, I think that's a very interesting point. I mean, strangely enough, one of the reasons why I'm a Canadian who works for the UN and I'm not working for the Canadian government anymore, I did work for a year, and then I got, in a sense, a scholarship to work for the UN for 3 years. And it was fascinating because the Canadian government didn't track, they didn't pay any attention. They gave me the clear impression that they could care less, even though this was a program that was supposed to provide Canadians with experience so that they could not just continue working for the UN, but could also come back to Canada after having an international experience. And there was no follow-up, there was no tracking whatsoever. And so, in a sense, that was part of the reason why I ended up staying with the UN, in the sense that I got this clear sense from the Canadian government that they paid for me for 3 years, but they didn't bother to follow up, so this is not the only place that sort of thing happens. As an employer, I disagree with your first point. And I'll tell you why. I disagree with your first point because since, like, of course, Facebook hasn't been around for forever, and for the first 2/3 of my career or whatever, it wasn't around. But you know, and obviously, when you're in a place like Kosovo versus my last job, I was at headquarters in New York. I had less interaction with people looking for employment. But you would not believe how many ever since I came to Kosovo, I have somewhere in the order of 100 friends requests on Facebook, and I don't know who the hell these people are. And sometimes I do know who they are, but I'm not going to be their friend. Because why? Because they think that by being my friend, or by having a coffee with me, or by somehow, forging a connection with me, that's somehow going to make me give them a job or prefer them over somebody else. I'd much rather have the person with the stronger CV make it through to the shortlist and give them the full chance. So I'd rather have the person with the stronger CV than the person who I'm a friend with on Facebook or I had a coffee with or something at some point. I'm not saying that yeah, you got to get out there and meet people and have informational interviews and get to know and connect people. I'm not saying that that's a bad thing. I'm just saying that there's a culture here that I'm dealing with that I don't like, which is people think that the fact that somehow you met me once or whatever, or you think that you can send me a Facebook friendship request and I'm going to be your friend and therefore you're going to get a job out of it. And that's happened to me on a number of occasions, and I'd much rather actually do everything I can to make sure that the people that I don't know, who have excellent CVs and have the right track record, etc., make it to my desk rather than somebody who I had a coffee with. But let's take more comments and questions.
I have.
I'm Vitim, I'm a fourth year student here at A.U.K, and I'm also planning to leave here after I finish A.U.K, but not as an immigrant, but I plan to go and study abroad. And the problem that I see here is that the government doesn't really care about this issue. Well, we can do a lot of policies and can you do this and can you do that, but they don't actually care. So do you actually think that they care? Do you think that they actually see these things? Thank you.
I'm gonna answer this question in a somewhat sideways way, in the sense that I think that there are individuals who care, and they care a lot. What I see happening from sort of a public administration reform perspective is that you're working here in Kosovo within a system that has a high degree of unnecessary complexity. A very high degree of unnecessary complexity. And there's a lot of reasons, and I'm still struggling to try and figure out exactly why that is. But for me, the contrast of coming from a metropolitan area like New York City, with close to 10 million people, or whatever the latest population is, to a place like Kosovo, and you compare, how New York City is run, and the way that it's organized, etc., and then the way that things are organized here, even the people with the best of intentions, if you're working within a system with the processes and the coordination requirements, etc., when you have 18 ministries, when you could probably make do with 6, and you have 100 and something independent agencies working on this, overlapping issues, where in a sense responsibilities are parceled out, not necessarily based primarily on the issue of merit, but on family connections or political connections, whatever. So one of the things I think that we as the international organizations, we're partly to blame because we helped to create these institutions, these multiple institutions. It's what happens when you build, a public sector infrastructure from scratch, and obviously not entirely from scratch, but a lot of it was from scratch, and different, different interests came to bear over the last 15 years, etc. So we're part of the problem. And we got used to that, and the other problem and the other trap that we fall into as international organizations is that we hate a vacuum. And so in the absence of clear leadership and coordination, if you don't coordinate us and if you don't tell us what to do, we'll rush in and fill the gap. And so essentially I think that there are, I'm not going to comment on the intentionality behind where we are today, but I think the situation speaks volumes, in the sense that I always tell people that I tell my own, before I was here, I was with the rest of the UN agencies in coordination meeting. One of the things that I always say to them is don't sit and complain about how something didn't happen, because basically it's not good enough to just sit in a room and agree that something should happen. But I think that's somewhat ingrained in the culture that we've created here around certain challenging issues that I see again and again, that you get to the point where you have agreed, yes, this is a problem and we must do something about it, and then we've just invested, I don't know, a year's time and resources in developing a strategy for this thing, and we pat each other on the back and we say, well, that's great, but we didn't put any resources behind it, and we didn't put any management structure behind it to actually implement what we just agreed to do. So for me, again, I'm not going to question people's intentions or values or what it is, but for me it goes down to a very simple question, which is, A, who's responsible? Because if everybody's responsible, then nobody's responsible. And I think that here in Kosovo, you've developed a great degree of expertise in making everybody responsible, so therefore nobody's responsible. And it's very hard to hold people accountable for lack of implementation when you don't have that. My question is, A, who's responsible? B, did you put any money behind it? C, do you have some sort of management mechanism and follow-up mechanism so that you actually know whether or not things are changing? And Kosovo is like a graveyard of unimplemented strategies, work plans, et cetera, because those three criteria were not met. And for me, that's a systemic problem. That's not an individual problem. That is a systemic problem that you need to address. And you need young people like yourselves who get that and say, yeah, I don't want to be a part of something that doesn't have a budget, that doesn't have management, and doesn't have clear lines of responsibility.
I'm Daniel Babuli, senior here at the UK. I have a question. Kosovo is a young country, and I don't know if you've had experience with the other developing countries, but in Kosovo, what strikes me the most is that the government is the biggest employer, if not, it is a top 5 employer. And that's due to nepotism and employing certain family members. It is expected from certain political members to hire their family members. Does this happen in other places, or is it just Kosovo?
It's hard to generalize, and also in the sense that every place is different and the context is different. I'm trying to think of a good example of a previous experience that I had. But yeah, you run into similar situations. There's always a contest. How many of you are like political scientists? Any of you? Yeah, okay. This is partly what we study in the sense that, as political scientists, we're trying to understand, why these sorts of things happen. Because for me, every context that I've worked on in development, yeah, something like that has happened, and it's a matter of, sort of understanding, what are the power structures and who's fighting for power, and then you as an international organization, the better you understand those power structures. So I'll give you a very clear example of a previous situation that I had. And I'm giving you examples of previous situations partly because I'm not even trying to pretend that I fully understand what you just talked about and why it's happening and what's driving that. And I think it's important for all of us who are working for change to be able to understand the specifics of the Kosovo context so that we may not be able to change everything that you described, but we need to be able to work with it and to promote positive change. So I'll give you an example from a previous experience that I had. So I had a different job earlier when I was working in Cyprus, where my job there was to work not so much on economic development or social development issues, but much more on inter-ethnic collaboration and reconciliation at a community level and at a civil society level. And what we, it took me about 2 years to figure this out, and I was only there for a little less than 3 years, so it took me far too long to figure this out. But that, sort of the political economy of Cyprus is such that not only during that time that I was there were, not only, how should I put it, not only was there essentially the whole process of dialogue, and you also have your own dialogue going on here, and I would question the use of the term dialogue, because for me a dialogue is by definition an inclusive process, rather than two people sitting in a room or two people with their teams sitting in a room forging deals. But in Cyprus there was a dialogue between the two communities that was completely dominated by the political elite, and they not only did they not want to create any space for civic engagement in that peace process that they were engaging in, and that was a problem for me, because that was part of my job. Was that the idea was that there would be a kind of a trickle-up effect, that the more you got communities at the community level working together, then it would trickle up to the political level. So these guys were experts in ensuring not only that there would be no civic engagement in the actual peace process, but that they actually felt so threatened by that they would be willing to go and attack civil society actors who were collaborating with each other from the two different ethnic groups, the Turkish Cypriot and the Greek Cypriot. And this was probably one of the most traumatic experiences that I've ever had, because essentially you started to sort of question, well, why am I even here? In the sense that my job was to try and create some change here, and yet I'm even personally being attacked. And I took it to heart, and I guess what I'm trying to say with this example is that the solution in that particular case, I couldn't go and change the political elites, and I couldn't, replace them. I couldn't change their way of operating. But what I needed to do is I needed to be much smarter in the way that, rather than, in this particular case, what we did was we shifted our whole approach, and what we built instead of working with individual civil society actors who wanted to work with each other, we switched our whole approach so that we developed a strong platform for civil society engagement. So rather than working with individual civil society organizations, we developed a platform. And the first thing that we helped them to do was to develop a strong communications capacity, so that the next time in the future, when they were being, in a sense, being pushed out from the role of being change agents, if you get what I'm saying, by the political elite, they actually had more skills and capacities in their toolbox, so that they weren't put in a box in the way that they were put in the box when I was there. And now, if you look at Cyprus today, you see a fundamental difference in the relationship between civil society and the political elites. And I'm not going to say that that's all because of the UN, but part of it is because of the fact that we looked at the sorts of things that you were describing. They were somewhat different in the case of Cyprus. We said, look, we're not going to be able to change this, but we can work around it. We need to be smarter in the way that we work on these things, because we're not going to change the Kosovo culture overnight, but we can start to do things in a smarter way that allow Kosovars themselves to change the culture. And that's what we did in Cyprus, and that's the sort of thing that we need to be trying to do, I think, as international actors, in the way that we engage. And also, we have to be very, very careful about practicing what we preach as well. Because it's very easy to fall into the trap of saying, well, you should do this and this and this, and then if you open up the agency and take a look inside, and you start to see that we actually don't do what we're telling the Kosovars to do, then that is obviously going to be counterproductive. I think I totally didn't answer your question, but I thought I did a marvelous job of not answering your question. So thank you for raising it. Yeah, so we'll go here, and then we'll go here, and then we'll go there. We'll go.
Hello. My name is Albina. I work at A.U.K. and I'm also one of the people who has lived abroad and moved back. And I also actually studied American diaspora and immigration. But I have a question more specific to people that are emigrating for professional development. And I understand that there's lack of data, like Dennis said, people don't sign up when they leave or when they come back. But for example, if I'm a medical doctor and I'm leaving Kosovo for further professional development, and do I fall under the data as an immigrant seeking employment or education? Because I see here that in 2012, almost 14% of the people that emigrated were employed, yet 52% immigrated for employment. So would this group fall under this, maybe this 13%, or is there no data about these people?
Why don't we take all three comments and questions, and then obviously I think Dennis will take the lead on that one. The fellow in the middle.
Thank you. My name is Deridan Latifi, and I graduated from A.U.K a few years back. Of course, you know, the diaspora is so very important to Kosovo, and if they contribute substantially to Kosovo's economy. I was thinking in the long term, do you think remittances will go down, or will they stay at the same level in the next 15 to 30 years?
And then there's,
I wanted to ask, why would you think that someone from abroad will come to contribute or work in Kosovo, seeing the fact that unemployment rate is around 45%, and seeing the fact that the healthcare is not developing and also the education level is not that rich? So how would you encourage someone to come and work here? I know that, like, because of this issue, someone needs to come and contribute, but I know that someone would not sacrifice their lives just to come and contribute. So how would you encourage them to come
here? Any other? Okay, so I like that. I'm going to choose that question to respond to, and then I'll let Dennis do the others.
Okay, thank you. Thank all of you for your questions. The first question is a very good one. What we used for the Human Development Report 2014 is a remittance survey, which was conducted by UNDP, and it's a representative survey. It's a well-done research, and I can tell you that there we put a question: do you have in mind to migrate? And then we put another question, an additional one: if yes, why? So then you had one option to give it for, like, I don't know, any kind of reason, but then we put like employment, education, and those sectors as you see here. So all the people who have put their in, like in your case now, for employment, we didn't put another question, how long or will you come back, but they are considered in that category. Okay. The second question was related to remittances, right? Okay.
Yeah, with the future trend.
Exactly. In this report, we've seen not a big change related to remittances inflow in three last years. But one of our analysts, who has written also the chapter on economic development in the report, she found out that remittances inflow will fall down throughout the years. And we have tried to figure out why is that, and maybe you can also start a discussion, I don't know, after Andrew's response. But what we also were discussing is also the fact that families abroad and also their children, they assimilate, they integrate into their countries, and they just don't think about coming back to Kosovo. That was one of the debates that we had among analysts, but it would be also interesting to have your opinion on this. Thanks.
So what you're saying is that, I mean, we're the person who we worked with, one of the analysts, was quite convinced that the trend will, and I mean, I think from an intuitive sense that as people assimilate more, they will continue to forge greater connections in the local economy. Coming from Canada, it's interesting in the sense that, well, I didn't come, my background, so, most Canadians are, majority of Canadians are immigrants, so I came from somewhere else, and I'm not an exception to the rule. My dad's British and my mother's American. And on the one hand, in my particular case, yeah, we have family, we're relatively recent immigrants, but Canada and the United States, they're full of people who, you look at their surname, you can tell that somewhere a long time ago they had a connection to some place, and that place might even be still relatively poor or whatever, and would benefit from there, but they feel no. Literally, even though I grew up in a city of immigrants, there was no sense, there was a very little sense of connection back to home for so many of us as kids growing up. We'd already lost that connection. The only reason why I went back to New Jersey was because I had an aunt there, but it wasn't like, New Jersey was calling me. Maybe New Jersey isn't calling anybody, I'm not sure, but anyway, but yeah, so it's an intuitive sort of thing. Now, I thought all the questions were great. I think that's a really, really good question. I don't know exactly the answer to that. I know that, for example, in my case, I grew up in Canada, and I ended up going to a school of international public affairs and studying economic and political development. And what drove me to spend my whole life working in places where I don't have good health care and where the conditions of living were not the same as I would have enjoyed over the past 25 years in Kingston, Ontario, Canada, it's complex. Everybody's driven by different factors. For me, it was, I have always felt that the world is a big place. Even if I could leave the world and go somewhere else and explore, I would want to leave the world and go. That's not going to happen. So if that's not going to happen, I want to see as much of the world as I can. It's a big, beautiful place. And the most positive, enriching, challenging, difficult moments of my life have been spent in places that are very difficult to live in. And I wouldn't put Kosovo in the top categories of the most difficult place I've ever lived in. It's definitely below Cyprus. Cyprus was like the perfect place because it was just like this paradise that had an incredibly complex political problem that we got to work on. But I guess what I'm saying, everybody's going to have a different answer to that question. But for me personally, it was this sense of like, yeah, I could have it easy, I could take it easy, but why would I want to do that? This is a big, crazy, complicated world. And I'll tell you, the thing that really drove me the most was after I graduated from university, I went west around the world. And it was nice because I started out in the Pacific, the South Pacific. And that got me thinking, boy, it's nice here. There's fish, there's coconuts, in French Polynesia, they have cheap French red wine. I like this. It ain't so bad. And then I noticed that the French Polynesians hated me, and I couldn't understand why. It's like I'm just some Canadian dude with a backpack. Why do you hate me? And it's because even in my post-student days, I had much more income than they had. I was much more privileged. There was a sense of tension, and it got me thinking. And then what really got me engaged in this kind of work was actually I arrived in Mumbai in India, and nothing, a little bit later on, 12 months later, I got that far west around the world, and nothing in the South Pacific or elsewhere had prepared me for the intensity of that experience, and it just totally traumatized me. It was like, you'd seen movies about India, but nobody had warned me that it would be louder and smellier and more people than you could ever imagine in a single place, And it just really, it threw me into this kind of spin, but then I came out of it thinking, man, this world is a fantastic place, you know. So my encouragement to you is, yeah, you know, get out there and see the world and experience, because it's a really amazing place. So that was my answer. I'm gonna also, we want to take a few more questions before we wrap up, but I want to put Barda on the spot. And I want to ask her, so think of Barda as a proxy Kosovar Albanian, but she's not, she's a Canadian Albanian. So why the hell are you here? You came, you interned with us, you went back to Canada, and now you're here again. What's your problem? So what is it that drives you to come back?
Hey, everyone.
I hope you don't get sick, because you'll be in big trouble.
No, I'm the immune system. So I was in Canada for 16 years. I came here to do an internship with UN. I really enjoyed it. I had a great experience, so I'm back now. I had to do research for University of Toronto, and I love it here. I mean, I love the people, I like the culture. My roots are here, so I'm learning more about my family, my ancestors, and I am willing to contribute as a Canadian in Kosovo and make a difference.
Okay, so I don't want to keep you guys from lunch for too much longer. So let's just take one last round and then we'll wrap it up. So please.
I have a quick question. When you were talking about remittances and how they're being used, did you guys study how they're being used? What I'm particularly interested in is how much is being used for consumption and how much is being used in any kind of productive, development sort of way.
Excellent question. Any more? So at the back, please.
Okay, I just want to add something. Hi everyone, I'm Gabriela Plana from Mitrovica. In this case, I would like to mention migration from one place to another, from one rural place, for example, to a city. As I'm from Mitrovica, I know what's the situation there, and I know lots of people that moved from the north part to the south part, and I really don't support that. On the other hand, we are talking for migration abroad, and recently, as we know, hundreds and thousands went abroad for different reasons. But I know lots of people that have finished their studies. They do not find a job here, and they really don't have to wait here for a miracle to happen to them one day. So in this case, I would support them because they don't have to study, they don't have to stay here and suffer all life long. Thank you.
Any more? This is your last chance. Although, also, I think what we want to do, I was thinking about the fact that we were live streaming this and the fact that that means I have to behave myself, more than I normally have to do. And we want to, like we said at the beginning, I mean, we're interested in interns, we're interested in having engagement with young people. We're actually developing a joint UN program on youth engagement. For those of you who want to, for example, you can intern with Dennis, you can pester him about opportunities, etc. We want to continue the conversation. One of the things that I want to do is I want to also invite smaller groups of students just to come to our offices and have lunch with us and have chats with us about things and continue the conversation. So this is not the end of the conversation. And so we signed this memorandum of agreement because we truly want to have an open and collaborative relationship. But let me just again thank you so much for doing this, taking the time to spend with us. I'll let Dennis go first, and then I'm just going to do a last little response to your comment at the back there, and then we'll wrap it up.
Okay, thanks a lot, Michael, right? Michael? Very good question. So I would summarize this, the inflow of remittances in three main things. First is housing, second thing is food, and third thing is health. So the main amounts, or the biggest amounts, where Kosovans, which households of Kosovo use the remittances, are these three things. And more or less, if we look at the business side, then we can see that real estate, like you can see constructions in Kosovo going on, main money there is coming from diaspora. So if you need like numbers, you have it in the report captured. And maybe was there another question that I should answer? Remittances, what was the other
Well, did
one?
you want to say anything about in response to the woman's comment back there? Or?
From Mitrovica, the woman, the question, I didn't get the question. So you're talking about migration inside Kosovo, coming from people from rural areas coming to urban areas. Yes, okay. Yes. Yes, I mean in the report we see that main Kosovars who migrate are people from rural areas. And also, I don't know if somebody from you has anybody abroad, we can, also the perception is like that if we talk to somebody coming from abroad or having family members, they state, most of them, that they are coming from rural areas. And this has also to do with the migration waves captured in the report. For example, the first migration wave starting in 60s was related to these short assignments in construction and field work where Kosovars were going there for a season and coming back. So these Kosovars were coming exactly from rural areas, and they stayed actually with time there, and they have established kind of community, and they brought their families. We saw in Andrew's presentation that family reunification was one of the biggest chunk there. So these people brought their family members there, and they stayed actually abroad. Okay, I don't know if I answered more or less the question. We didn't do a specific study on internal migration. We just looked at people going outside of Kosovo and Kosovar diaspora as a whole.
But I just mentioned that Mitrovica, because people are moving from the north part to the south just because they don't have good conditions to live there. So they are moving from a city to a city. So when people don't have a good life, they will probably move to another country or to another country. That's why
I mean, yeah, I mean, it's, you know, it's obviously it's far too complicated a question to address in the final 2 minutes. I mean, it's an excellent question, and it's one that you need to ask yourself. It's what every family needs to ask. You know, what would it take to keep me to stay here? I will again, you know, somewhat sidestep the issue, the question, and answer it from a different perspective, which is, for example, okay, so I spent a good chunk of time, especially the last decade, in New York City. And New York City, for many decades, had this eyesore, this ugly thing. It was called the High Line Railway, and it ran down the west side of New York City. Ugly thing, you know, rotting metal, overgrown with weeds, etc. But one day, two guys were up there. They somehow got access, and they had a vision that this was actually could become a beautiful thing rather than an eyesore. They were planning on tearing it down. It used to be that you had these industrial buildings, and you still have the industrial buildings, but the trains would actually run through the buildings and drop off things and pick up things, etc. It was a railway. Ugliest thing in the world. And they turned it into something. They took something that was a weakness and something that would have driven people away and driven property values down, and they turned it into one of the most beautiful parks in the world. And it draws people, and you go to that part of town now, and there are cafes and beer halls and pop-up restaurants and cultural events that weren't happening before, etc. It's become a magnet for people, and I think that's what every place needs, are people who can look at the look at the lemons and make lemonade, or, whatever the metaphor is. So you said that people, get sick and tired of waiting for a miracle. Well, why are you waiting? My question to you would be, to all of you, is make your own miracle. Now you may not, you may come to the individual conclusion that your miracle cannot happen here. And you should be able to pursue your miracle somewhere else. But for a lot of you, look at that mess that's out there. There's a lot of opportunity in that mess. And with persistence and with creativity and stay here. I'm trying to remember the name of the author, but one of this very subversive novel that I read years ago, the last 2 lines in the novel say, two things you got to remember: everything's connected, and B, so don't think that and I think that I find that often people forget that, in the sense that you get something positive going in one area, it'll have spillover effects somewhere else as well. So get something small, something good happening, and then you can start to change the mindset, and you can start to change the culture. The second thing is, it's never too late to have a happy childhood, which I take as being, it's not a good situation, but it's never too late to actually do something. Don't go and throw stones at windows and break things. That's not going to make you happier. That's not going to make things better. Sorry, that popped in my mind because I was at the government building yesterday and they still haven't fixed the windows. But you take that energy, take that initiative, take that creativity. You're young people. You should be rebellious. So rebel. And create something beautiful in this place. And remember, it's all connected, so you're not alone. Do it together and change the culture and make your own miracle here in Kosovo, if you can.